So now comes the actual study part of this piece, and I'm just starting to dissect this building to see what I'm going to use in what atlas, what my tiling textures will be, and what I might vertex blend into. I'm also just splitting this up into what 3D models I'll be using in their finest building blocks, so I can more easily just stack these on top of each other, like windows, walls, fences, etc. And as usual, I'm also saving some space to do some unique props that will be a bit on their own. I also drew this rickshaw and I just admitted to myself I really can't draw a bike, and I just hope the 3D model of this won't suck as hard. I'm also just trying to make sense of the house in a way, like how it's built, the proportions, and how things relate or are stuck into each other. It's a bit confusing, and at this point I really didn't know what to do with all of it, and how every spot was going to work out. But just figured, well, it has to be a part of the process. So maybe the block out will somehow help me visualize this more. I'm also adding one more spot in my concept nowadays, which I call vibes. It's something that I learned from What We Love But Forgot. And it was kind of like these last minute additions, but I wanted to give it some thought at this stage because last time in What We Love But Forgot, all these things were kind of like added last minute, and there were some things that I forgot about, or like I thought about them, but then I forgot to add them in, and then they just disappeared somewhere in the process. So I just wanted to at least scribble something down this time around. And so vibes is just anything that isn't necessarily important for the bigger building blocks, but they're important for the overall vibe and feeling of the piece. At this point, I'm feeling pretty all right with the concept. I try to settle in the planning stage nowadays instead of just immediately putting myself into the production stage. Because I've noticed something with me that as soon as things get a little bit fuzzy or unclear, and I'm trying to figure these things out while I'm like down in the details, I find myself a bit of a action paralysis because I'm in the mindset of just moving forward and producing things, but the plan isn't really in front of me. So it's like I'm trying to build a house while I'm still making architectural decisions about it. The concept stage is also pretty important to at least think about what creative freedom I'll take in my project. For example, I do love vegetation, and it's just something that I will add a lot more than actually exists on the house. So in my concept, I will maybe do like a quick jot down of like where I want the vegetation and what kind of vegetation I want. But as much as it is important to determine when you're going to let your creativity flow, it's also important to maybe think about when you need to reel your creative freedom back. Like, for example, I saw that the bricklayering technique is not what I'm used to. So, right off the bat, as soon as I saw it, I just made the decision to, I'm just going to make it like every other brick that I've been using so far. Because it's just going to look more interesting, is what I thought, kind of like arrogantly. But as I'm looking at the building more and more, I'm noticing that this other kind of bricklayering technique, which is kind of like the symmetrical one, it now and then breaks up the pattern, makes it quite interesting. And I'm Googling, like, what is this actually that I'm looking at? And I see that these are different kind of bricklayering techniques, and the one that I'm looking at now is called stack bond. Um, and at this point, I'm figuring like, why not? It's not something that I haven't tried before. I always do this running brick pattern, so why not just see how the real one stacks up? Now I'm moving away from my own drawings and getting some references. So I'll move to PureRef and just try to find images or inspiration for anything I need. One thing is that I used to work in a project where I would maybe need to model a certain species of a tree. So let's take this palm tree, for example. If I want to model this and look at some reference images, I don't necessarily need this exact species, but I need, some kind of tree to look at, and that could be in the area. So in that other project that I was working in, I would have to like hunt down this if that area had like a site that covered the flora and fauna of the area. I would Google every species on that list and maybe try to match it with a photo. And that was a painstaking process. Sometimes I would even go to forums to get people to help me identifying some trees. And now, however, I am trying ChatGPT or Gemini of any of these AI things to just prompt it and ask what I need to. Sorry, so I'm prompting it to ask like I'm making a 3D model of a coconut tree that grows in Dhaka, and then I like made a crop of this image, and I ask it like, can you give me an example of what kind of species this could be? And like, sure, it does require me to know some things about the tree or describe it to some extent, but it really just cuts down the amount of like research time by quite a lot. And like, for example, here, I need a vine here. And usually I've just been using my ivy vine that I use for most of my projects, but I noticed here that the vine was looking a bit different. So then I used Gemini to get a vine in Dhaka which gave me this one, but I'm like, you know what? I'm looking at my references, and this is actually not close enough of what I wanted. I wanted more dense leaves, rounder leaves, etc. So I just give this exact feedback to Gemini, saying like it has alternating leaves, and then Gemini gives me back this creeping fig, and I'm like, this is actually close enough, even though it's not this exact plant. This is good enough for me to base off. And apart from that, I was also just able to upload part of the plant on Gemini as well, and that could, help me to get something that I could use as a base. And just image recognition, I would say I wasn't getting always the best results in Gemini. It worked in one case, I think, but in general, it didn't really help me that much. So I wouldn't rely on it too much. But if you feed it more information and just do a little bit of a feedback sessions, you will get there.